All right, guys, so welcome to this fantastic session with Founder Catalyst, who is Sam, who will be kicking off in a moment, and I'm Martin from 8 Seconds to Connect. So I'm going to just do the little intro and then hand you over to Sam. And teaser, spoiler alert, we do have an amazing SEIS latest news just come off the wire, and Sam's going to jump into that very shortly. So we really appreciate you coming and spending an hour with us today. And today is all about how to get your pitch, SEIS Advance Assurance, and then pitch like a rock star. And if you look over Sam's shoulders, you can see some frames with some iconic album covers, and that is what has inspired today's theme, because we both really like the second album on the bottom. Right, so these are the 4 things that we're going to talk about. The 4 must-haves when speaking to angels about your finance pitch deck. We're going to share some rockstar pitching skills. We're going to talk about how to make sure that HMRC is super happy. And then there's an option to book a 30-minute call for 3 of you. And then we'll have some Q&A. So this is the format for today. Let's jump in. Nonetheless, let me hand over to Founder Catalyst. And Sam, take it away.
Thanks, Martin. So what I'll do is introduce myself. Then I'd like to give some really breaking news on some changes to both the SEIS and EIS scheme that have been announced by the Chancellor today. And this is massive news. If you're looking to raise or you are raising in the UK, you need to kind of take stock on what these changes mean. And I'm a bit distracted today because I'm very excited about the changes. Tax law doesn't change that much in this area, so this is really great news. But first, let's do an intro. So I'm Sam Simpson from Founder Catalyst. I'm an exited founder myself, so I grew a business from 0 to 30 million in 3 years and exited to private equity. And since then, I've been an angel investor. So over the last 5 years, I've made 29 investments now with a really, really strong preference for kind of SEIS, first funding round. I'm sector agnostic, so I invest in anything that where I love the product or service and love the founding team. I founded Founder Catalyst in order to solve a problem that I spotted in the market, which is there are loads of founders out there who really want to do a funding round in order to realize the dream of their business, but they don't know how to go from having a bright idea through to closing their first funding round. They are underserved in terms of that kind of knowledge gap. So Founder Catalyst does 4 things. Firstly, we offer a whole bunch of free stuff for all founders looking to do their first funding round, and they may be a year out from that, but this stuff will still be useful. Things like employment contracts, contracts, NED contracts, term sheets, and things like that. So we've got loads of free resources. Please do check them out on our site. The second thing we do is help people get SEIS and EIS Advance Assurance, and we'll talk through those schemes, what they mean for you, and what Advance Assurance is in a bit. The third thing we do is legal funding round paperwork. So we help you to get all of the paperwork you need in order to complete a funding round. We do that for a fixed low price. You invite your investors to the platform. Everybody's signed. We issue share certificates. So it's literally every piece of paperwork you need. And the fourth thing we do is make introductions between our customers and potential sources of funding. That was quite a pitch, wasn't it? So what I want to do first, let me just quickly dive into the details on the SEIS and EIS changes, because I think they're really, really relevant to everybody on this Zoom call. So to recap, back in the, or as things are now, before the changes, you are limited under the SEIS scheme to raising £150,000, and you need to do that within 2 years of start of trade. There is a cap on your gross assets, and there is a limit to how much investors can invest under the SEIS scheme each year. The government has raised all of these massively, so it's really, really great news if you are raising your first funding round. The implications if you're raising your second funding round and you've already used your SEIS are unclear. I think those will, over the next 6 months, those details will be released. But let's talk about what are those increases in turn. So the SEIS limit had always been, since SEIS's inception, £150,000. That's the maximum you can raise under SEIS. And then you would move on to the EIS scheme, and you can raise many, many millions via EIS. So the government has just announced that that limit has gone from £150,000 to £250,000, which is absolutely amazing. In reality, it's really rare that we see anybody raising just £150,000. Everybody raises 150 via SEIS and then have to raise 100, 150 on top via EIS. So it really sets a natural bar, I think, for people doing the first funding round. I think £250,000 will be the new default, which is brilliant. They've also increased the age limit. So right now the rules are that you have to raise within the first 2 years of starting to trade. And the rules have changed now for that to be 3 years, which is amazing. You know, that gives you an extra year on top. And it means that if you're currently, you know, if you're just over your 2-year time limit now, you should be able to raise via SEIS when the new rules come into place. Right now, there is a limit on how much I, as an investor, can spend under the SEIS, invest under the SEIS scheme, and that's £100,000 a year, which sounds a lot, but for angel investors, you know, that can be a really strong limit. They've just raised that cap up to £200,000, so it's doubled the amount I can invest under that SEIS scheme. Yeah, so amazing changes, lots and lots of kind of corner cases and caveats to come out, I'm sure. These changes have been announced today and will come into being on early April 2023. So if you're thinking of doing a funding round now and you're thinking you're constrained by the 150, and it would be typical to raise 150 and then 100 via EIS, I would suggest you pause and don't do that, because raising that £100,000 via EIS may preclude you from raising the additional £100,000 under SEIS. So for now, I would do nothing. If you're halfway through a raise, I would slow play it a little bit whilst the dust settles over the next few days, and the Chancellor kind of clarifies some of the implications of this. Well, it's really big news. The Chancellor has also announced today, so the second change, which is to do with EIS. Now, EIS is due to sunset in a couple of years, which means that the EIS scheme itself terminates by default. And the Chancellor has indicated really strong support for the EIS scheme. Now, he hasn't announced if he's removing the sunset clause or extending it by a few years or whatever, but there is, you know, I think the government would be absolutely mad to let that EIS scheme lapse, and it looks like the Chancellor agrees with that. So I'd expect clarification over the next few days, but I would expect that to push out to 2030 or whatever, which is great news for startups in the UK. Good stuff. So back onto the normal content. As you can tell, I'm really excited about these changes because they're long overdue and they're fundamental to anybody raising kind of first funding rounds in the UK. So what I wanted to do in this section is really outline how you as a founder get your ducks in a row for your first funding round. Because Martin's about to tell you some great insights into how to pitch like a rock star. But what I see is lots of founders, you know, doing a really great pitch. You know, they'll take Martin's advice on board. They've got a great pitch deck maybe, but they haven't got the rest of their ducks in a row. And what that means is you create really great excitement across your investors, and everybody's, you know, they're all contacting you, asking for, you know, the core documentation they would expect to see. And you might not have those things in place, and it will take you 2 weeks or a month or whatever to get those in place. And the investor finds something else. You know, investors are easily distracted. They'll spot a squirrel and go and invest in something else and forget about your startup. So really, you want to capitalize on that opportunity. When you've done your pitch, you want to have all your ducks in a row so you can satisfy your investors. So what do I mean by ducks in a row? Well, for me as an angel investor, there are 4 things I expect to see. When anybody approaches me, whether it's on LinkedIn, a pitch event, via an angel network, whatever it happens to be. The first is really, really obvious as a pitch deck, and hopefully everybody has this in place. Martin will go into much more detail about how to structure this. Martin is king of producing easy to digest and pitch decks that really tell a compelling story. But needless to say, you need a pitch deck in place. You need one for a couple of purposes, actually. Firstly, as an investor, I'll absolutely expect to see it. But secondly, you won't be able to get SEIS or EIS Advance Assurance in place with HMRC unless you have either a pitch deck or a business plan. So it's absolutely vital. It is the first thing you should work on. And out of all of the 4 documents we're talking through here, pitch deck is by far the hardest to get right. It's, you know, it is always iterative. You'll produce it once, you'll show it to people, you get loads of feedback. You'll never get it right first time, and you should always expect it to take, you know, at least a month or 2 to get a pitch that is worthy of showing to investors. So next slide, please, Martin. The second document I want to talk through is a term sheet. So lots of you will have heard what a term sheet is, but effectively it is a summary of the deal terms. So it is a summary of the offer you are making to investors. Now, at some point in the future, investors will expect you to have all of the normal documentation in place to complete a funding round. So things like shareholder agreement, articles of association, as well as founder service agreement, IP assignment, disclosure letters, and a whole bunch of other stuff that are incredibly standardized in early funding rounds. But right up front, investors don't want to read a couple of hundred pages of documentation to understand what the offer is. They want to read a 4 or 5 page document called a term sheet that distills those key parts in your investment proposition. And allows an angel investor to understand whether the proposition's for them or not. A term sheet is generally not legally binding. There are a couple of clauses that are confidentiality and things like that, but generally a term sheet isn't legally binding. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you as a founder offer me a term sheet, then even though we both signed the term sheet, I'm not obliged to invest and you're not obliged to take my investment either. But it is a signal of intent that we're both interested in taking the conversation to the next level. And it's really, really important as a founder. I think it's important because what it does is create an anchor between you and your potential investor, because it will detail things like the valuation and some of the legal and commercial terms you're offering in your business. And it's really hard for me as an angel investor to then argue any points that have already been agreed in the term sheet. So once the term sheet's signed and agreed, if I come back and try and beat you up on the valuation or ask for a term that you've made clear isn't on offer in the term sheet, then as a founder, you can, it can be a very short conversation, because you can say, well, hang on, we've already agreed this principle in the term sheet. On Founder Catalyst, you can literally sign up today. You can create a free term sheet in about 20 minutes. So it's not hard to get, and it's not expensive to produce, but it's amazing the number of founders that I speak to that don't have this term sheet produced. So on to the next document, which is the financial forecast. And again, you'll need to produce these for 2 purposes. Firstly, in your pitch deck, you will include the inevitable graph showing your hockey stick growth over the next 5 years or whatever it happens to be. And quite often, angels will want to scratch under the surface and see the next level of detail. So they will want to look at your assumptions around revenue and costs and overheads, and see how that trickles down into EBIT. And secondly, you need one of these documents to satisfy HMRC. So one of the key documents you submit with an advance assurance submission will be your forward-looking forecast. It needs to be at least 3 years, and it needs to satisfy certain other conditions. On the Founder Catalyst website, I mentioned the free stuff, but we offer a minimum viable product forecast model, which is it's never once been challenged by HMRC, and it includes just enough detail to satisfy HMRC, and then you'll customize it depending on the type of business you have. So the final document that I want to discuss is the Vital Advance Assurance document. So in a few slides, I'll come back to talk about what SEIS and EIS are in terms of the tax relief and the benefits to both you as a founder and to your investors. But needless to say, Advance Assurance is a document issued by HMRC, and it is a guarantor. It is an email from HMRC which indicates that any investment in your business should benefit from the tax relief. And the reason why this is really, really important is, there are hundreds and hundreds of businesses that apply for the SEIS and EIS scheme each year. And according to HMRC's last statistics, roughly 30% of businesses aren't eligible under the scheme. So if you send me your pitch deck and your forecast, I can spend lots of time having nice conversations with you, doing due diligence and kicking the tires and negotiating, only to find out that your business isn't eligible under the schemes anyway. So what this advance assurance letter does, and it's simply an email from HMRC, it gives certainty to investors that any investment in your business will be eligible to those schemes. So that's enough exciting babble from me. I'd now like to hand over to Martin, who probably doesn't have any breaking news on the SEIS scheme, but can tell you all about pitching like a rock star.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sam. I remember the first time we met Sam. I met Sam and we were on a panel event together, and we were both giving feedback to a founder on their pitch deck. And I was just blown away at Sam's laser sharp feedback and accuracy throughout the whole deck. And it wasn't just the slides that you think he might be interested in, it was all of it. And he was like pulling stuff out. And what I love is the fact that he's really passionate about the nuts and bolts of how this stuff works. And like he said, if you don't get this in place, it doesn't work. So, you know, the pitch deck is sort of a fun visual thing, but it's also a massive time waster if you haven't got these fundamentals in place. So this is what I think the real value of today's session is like, get the nuts and bolts in place, get your pitch ready, and then you are in the strongest position to go out and do your best as a founder in the wild, wild world of investing and pitching and all this great stuff. So what I want to talk about is this. Your first 8 seconds of any pitch is when you need to come out and do an amazing guitar solo. Like you're on stage in a stadium, in a rock band in front of 400,000 people, and you've got the spotlight on you. And the problem is that most founders start really slow. Hello, yes, it's really nice to be here. Cut that. We want this. We want you to own the spotlight because you've earned everything about being there. You've built the idea, you've got this far, you've gone through the pain. There's a lot more pain to come, but you are in a place of power. And so feel that moment. How do we feel like a rock star? You need to add some zap, some pop, and some ping. Now, normally I'm a bit of an introvert. I'm a bit in the middle between extrovert and introvert. But when I come and present, I turn it up. A bit like in what's the rockumentary where they turn it up to 11 on the amplifier. I can't remember the name right now. It's escaping me. Someone drop it in the chat, please. But you have to. There you go, Ella. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Save me. At the moment, I'm in the engine shed in Bristol in a co-working space in a little booth. Normally, I'm stood up in a room, dancing about, getting super excited, but I'm aware of the people around me. But you have to add some zap, pop, and ping. You have to really amplify your personality because people buy from people. And the spotlight is a high value moment. We have 15 people on the call right now, 15 times your hourly rate. This moment is a high value moment. And when you've got investors that can write checks, it's even higher. So really embrace this moment and come in like a rock star. Now, how do we do that? The thing that everyone forgets is super basic, super fundamental. It's just breathing. Breathe in through your nose, exhale through your nose, but breathe from your waist, not up at the top of your chest, but from your waist, your bellows. Use your diaphragm and really bring in some fresh oxygen and use the device on the front of our faces that is designed for breathing. Our mouth is designed for talking and eating. Our nose is our breathing machine. And this diagram on the left says breathe in, hold, and exhale twice as long as you breathe in. And if you can carve out at most 5 minutes before your pitch to turn off your phone, turn off the distractions, find your inner peace, just like Lucy is walking through her forest right now. Find that moment, breathe through your nose. You will find an inner calm that allows you to be in the zone to own the spotlight, to then release like the rock star, like Slash doing the guitar solo of Sweet Child of Mine. That's how you need to start your pitch, because it's all about connections. It's all about reading the room, working the crowd, making eye contact, smiling, being a beautiful human, and being as appealing to the other humans in the space, whether it's on a call like now, or in the real room, at a coffee shop, at a co-working space, even on a walk, when you're pitching on a walk. Another fallacy is that you need a pitch deck, but you're not always going to be able to pitch with the pitch deck. I'm working with a founder at the moment. They're about to sign £1 million, and they didn't use the pitch deck that we created. He had a 2-minute phone call. He got 10 questions in 2 minutes, and that was enough to get the meetings to then meet the bigger team, and they're finalizing the money at the moment. He said that having made the pitch deck gave him the ability to pitch without the pitch deck. So you have to be flexible. You have to go with the flow. And again, breathing is super important for this, because your spotlight could happen anywhere at any time. That's why they call it the elevator pitch. The other thing that we really need to focus on as we make these human connections is your audience is thinking, what's in it for me? We need to get to this fast. And we need to build blocks to build the tower, to start on LinkedIn and build your personal brand, start dropping little mini remote pitches in the comments, in the posts, building a visibility so that by the time people say, yes, I want to talk to you, they know you already and they want to know what's in it for them, because time is non-refundable. If you waste people's time, boom, you are blacklisted. They don't want to see you again. But if you go in like a rock star, you build your personal connections, you're prepared, you're mentally clear, you're breathing properly, and you're showing them what's in it for them, understanding the audience, reading the room, then you're going to have a really strong position to make your connections, make that message memorable. Because again, when you meet someone like Sam, he's a gatekeeper to a much bigger network of other investors you've never met. So again, when you pitch with clarity and you deliver concise, emotive, interesting messages, and you are a wonderful person, which you all are, you're going to do really, really well. Because it's all about this moment. Creating a slice of ownership with the people that you have, that have given you their attention. So I can see Lucy's making tons of notes. That's fantastic. She's invested in this moment. Okay. However you absorb, I want you to start taking all these ideas about SEIS growth and security and HMRC and all of my nuts and bolts. That's what you're going to walk away with. That's the ownership you're taking away from today. The ownership that your audience will feel after your pitch comes through your energy and your performance and your connection, whether it's again on a phone call, on a walk, in a co-working space, or remotely sending a deck. It's all about making those connections. Because we want, just like a really great anthem on a pop song or a rock song, you want the audience to sing along with you, which means you want your audience to walk out the room and be able to tell other people about you. These guys are doing this. These people are saving these types of people time and money. How can you condense your pitch to an 8-second pitch? So the way that I get people to sing along with me is when people ask me, what do? I tell them I'm a crocodile wrestler. And I wait and I gauge the reaction of the room. And when I get confused looks saying, what does that mean? I'm like, that's what it feels like being the father of 4.5-year-old twin girls. They are my crocodiles and they are constantly snapping at my heels, and I am wrestling crocodiles all day. When I'm not doing that, when they're at school, I'm helping people like yourselves catch the attention of your audience before you tell them what you really do. And I have people coming to me in the DMs, and the first thing total strangers will say to me, we've never spoken, they'll ask me, how are my crocodiles? Because I've given them a pitch that they can own and that they are singing along with me. So how can you reduce the complexity of what you do to a bite-sized chunk that someone else can pitch on your behalf? Whether that's 8 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, a couple of minutes. We're really working towards getting the audience to sing along with you. And an example of this is Apple. How many founders have stood up and said, I want to change the world? But it worked for Steve Jobs, so people are taking that and they're interpreting it. Now it's a bit of a cliche. Or the other one, I want to be the Uber of whatever. It's a fantastic structure. It's a worn out cliche, but it can still be used if it's freshened up. So just like music back in the 60s, what my dad listens to and what I listen to are totally different, but we both love music. We both want to pitch like rock stars. So it's all about the moment in the spotlight when you're sharing, you're connecting, you're being a fantastic human, and your audience is thinking, yes, I love this. I get it. I can build on it. What can I do with it next? You're creating a sense of shared ownership. And you do that with epic visuals. And there's a ton of amazing resources online where you can find images. All the photographs that you're looking at today come from a website called Unsplash. And all the sketches I've done myself on my iPad, and I can teach you how to sketch. So if you don't think you can draw perfect, because you can sketch and you can visualize your thinking, because it's much better to show somebody something and let them be part of that idea than just to pitch and pitch and pitch and pitch and pitch and pitch and pitch. So this is the website where you can find free high-res professional images that you can use anywhere on your website, your pitch, your tote bag, your billboard. So go and check out unsplash.com. Amazing photography. So if you're making handmade Cornish ice cream and you search, you'll find amazing photographs of beaches, ice cream cones, sprinkles, and you can use them in your pitch deck to show, don't tell. So that was the end of Pitching Like a Rockstar. I'm now going to hand back to Sam, where we're going to talk about ensuring HMRC compatibility.
So, thank you, Martin. And just to go back to something you said, you're an introvert, apparently. I would never have guessed that, having been on lots and lots of these things with you. I would have never guessed that. But anyhow, so if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, which managed to go out of date from when I produced it this morning until now, which is amazing. I never guessed the Chancellor would do this to me. Anyhow, this slide is still correct as of today. As of April next year, it will need a polish. What I wanted to do, though, is do a couple of things in this section. So firstly, what I wanted to do is describe the benefits of SEIS and EIS to investors, which is great because this is going to be your hook to snag your investors. But also there are a couple of hidden benefits to founders of SEIS and EIS as well. So I wanted to very quickly cover those because they're not usually shouted about. And on the next slide, we'll talk about the process of how to get advance assurance in place and what it means. But let's look at the benefits first, if you wouldn't mind flipping back, Martin. So there are two different schemes. What are the schemes? Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme, which everybody probably knows, and Enterprise Investment Scheme. SEIS is the little brother to EIS. SEIS has a whole bunch of rules and tighter limitations than EIS. So under SEIS, you can only raise 150,000, must be within 2 years. EIS, you can raise up to 12 million over 7 years with a maximum of 5 million a year. There is another scheme at the top end called KIC, or Knowledge Intensive Company. Now, you need a PhD or master's in a relative subject, and there are lots of other caveats around this, but you can use EIS KIC if you meet those criteria, and that allows you, that raises the bar again. You can raise up to 20 million, 10 million a year over 10 years. Probably 10% of our customers are KIC eligible. Most companies either don't need EIS KIC or don't meet the criteria, but it's an interesting caveat at the top end there. So what do you do if you want to raise £300,000 in your first raise? You raise what's called a dual round, which is 150 via SEIS and then 150 via EIS. They're amazingly common, at least now, because 150 doesn't go very far under SEIS. You just need to be really, really, really careful when running a dual round, because you've got to take all of your SEIS investment before you take a penny of your EIS investment. If you get the ordering wrong, or one of your investors pays both SEIS and EIS at the same time, then you destroy all of the SEIS tax relief for all of your investors, which, for the avoidance of doubt, is a bad thing. So we are very paranoid at the end of a funding round, when you're about to collect the cash, to ensure that you get all of your SEIS cash. You wait a couple of days or a day, and then you start taking your EIS cash, because it's really easy to get that one. Let's talk about the benefit for investors under the SEIS scheme first. So imagine I'm an investor, which I am. I put £10,000 into your business, and instantly, or almost instantly, I get £5,000 back as tax relief. Now, that can either be a check from HMRC. Personally, I'm too lazy for all of that. I submit the forms in my yearly annual returns, and I get that as a tax relief in my annual return. So ridiculously good tax benefit, half of your money back straight away, which is great. If the business does really well, let's focus on the positive, and my £10,000 turns into £1 million, say, so 100 times increase in value when you exit, then there's no capital gains tax for me to pay on that increase. So I can turn £10,000, which is actually £5,000 because I've got £5 back already, into £1 million without paying a penny of tax. Now, that is just ludicrously good. What happens if things don't work out in the business? Well, there's something called loss relief, and this part of the tax relief depends on my prevailing tax condition at the time I invest. But effectively, it means I can get up to £2,700 back in addition to the 5,000 I've already had. So actually, when I put £10,000 into your business, if things don't go well, I'm risking £2,300. I'm not risking £10,000 at all. So it's just amazing, amazing value. There's another benefit that I don't think is listed on this slide, which is around inheritance tax relief. And inheritance tax relief means that as long as I own the shares for at least 2 years, if I happen to die, which is a bad day for me, obviously, but the shares, my investments under the SEIS and EIS scheme pass to my estate outside of the inheritance tax calculation. So that's, when you're in latter years like me, that's a really good tax relief to have in the bag. Moving on to EIS, lots of the scheme rules are the same. So the CGT exemption, capital gains tax exemption, is exactly the same. The inheritance tax exemption is exactly the same. If I invest 10,000 in your business under EIS, then I only get £3,000 back. So it's not 50% tax relief up front, it's 30%. So that's less, but on the flip side, you can raise much more. And the downside relief, the loss relief, is less as well. So I'm risking roughly 38% of my investment rather than 23%. So that's a summary of the benefits for the investors under these schemes. But there are two hidden benefits for founders. And to be clear, SEIS and EIS are, on paper at least, they only benefit the investor. There's no direct tax benefit to your business from using these schemes. The two benefits to you as a founder, though, well, first, if you're not raising under SEIS within the UK, then you're at a massive disadvantage. Virtually everybody who's raising early stage investment, so pre-seed, seed, and maybe the next round after that, virtually everybody in the market will have SEIS and EIS. If you don't have these schemes and you don't have advance assurance in place, well, you're at a massive disadvantage for all of the reasons I've just discussed. So if I have two opportunities, both virtually identical, one have SEIS, I'm going to get half of my money back, I'm going to get capital gains exemption, or another business without that. Well, it's a no-brainer. Of course, I'm going to invest in the SEIS and EIS business, everything else being equal. The second benefit, and this is something that people don't often recognise, is that the terms I can get under an angel investor under the SEIS and EIS scheme are very largely defined in the Tax Act of 2007. And they define things like, I'm not allowed to get, as an investor, liquidation preferences or anti-dilution or no dilution. Now, you may not know what those things mean, but they are founder unfriendly. They're investor friendly, which means they're great for investor, and they're not great for founders. But as part of the rules, by subscribing under the SEIS and EIS scheme, I can't, as an angel investor, ask for those things and use SEIS and EIS. So I've got a really stark choice. Do I want the amazing tax benefits of SEIS, EIS, or do I want to ask for these founder unfriendly terms? And invariably, people will take the tax benefits. Now, if you do multiple rounds and you end up taking money from either institutional investors or venture capital, they can't make use of SEIS and EIS. So the gloves come off in terms of the terms they'll invest under. And typically they will ask for all of those things, anti-dilution, potentially no dilution, and liquidation preferences. But from your early investors, you can be certain that the terms they'll be asking for are really, really founder friendly, which is a really, really great thing for you. If you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, Martin. I'll try and wrap this one up relatively quickly so we can get onto some Q&A. So this is the process. So as I mentioned earlier, advance assurance is a process of writing to HMRC with a whole bunch of stuff, and we'll cover what that is in a minute, and then getting a response from HMRC that you can wave at your investors and say, no fear, we've got advance assurance in place. The first thing to cover here is, and this is kind of a chicken and egg that virtually every founder raises, but in order to apply for advance assurance, you've got to have a named investor in place. So HMRC will insist on getting the name and address of an investor before they'll process your application. If you don't include it, they'll reject your application straight away. So, and people say, well, hang on, I can't get an investor in place before I get my advance assurance, but I can't get advance assurance until I've got my investor. So it's a kind of real chicken and egg scenario. All you need to do on your application is find somebody who, in principle, could invest in your business and can make use of the SEIS EIS scheme. So you need to be able to name somebody in your covering letter who isn't a family member, doesn't work for you, isn't a director, and is a UK-based taxpayer. Now, I'm pretty sure that everybody on this call here can name somebody they've got a friend or a neighbour or an acquaintance or an ex-colleague, whatever it happens to be, who ticks all of those boxes. We've never seen HMRC make inquiries of that person, so it is a really low bar to pass. The reason I thought I'd answer that straight up front is lots of people delay the advance assurance process until they get an investor in place, and then they struggle to get the investor because they don't have the advance assurance. But hopefully that gives you a little tip for getting the advance assurance process underway earlier. So this is the critical path for getting advance assurance in place. The first thing you need to do is incorporate. So you need to have a business that's incorporated in the UK. Generally, there are caveats to that. In order to incorporate, you need to do a few things, really. You need to pick a name. You need to probably get a registered office, because otherwise you'll have your home address planted all over company's house. You then need to go through the formal incorporation process, which takes 15 minutes and costs £15. So that's not really a barrier to entry. And this is something that catches lots of people out. You actually need a company bank account in the name of the business, and you need that because that's probably where the investment money is going to go. So you need to make sure you've got those kind of ducks in a row before you can apply for advance assurance. You then need to prepare some key documents. And I won't labour this one because we've already covered the pitch deck and the forecast model. It's worth mentioning that the bulk of the work preparing an advance assurance submission is completing the SEIS and EIS checklists. And in order to do that, they are a set of questions. For example, demonstrate your business is a genuine growth company, demonstrate capital is genuinely at risk, and sorry, I've got slide challenges here. Yes, they will ask questions like, demonstrate your business is a genuine growth company, and you need to answer that with reference back to your forecast model and your pitch deck. So you will say, we are a genuine growth company. We are growing by revenue, customers, and employees, as demonstrated on this page in the forecast model and this page on the pitch deck. So you've got to bring to life and demonstrate to HMRC how you meet each of the 50 of those 50 or 70 checklist criteria. So those documents are really key, and we do a review for our customers to ensure that the pitch deck and forecast are both, compatible with the HMRC process, but also resonate with me as an angel investor. And routinely, if there's too much work to be done, I'll point people toward Martin to roll up his sleeves and help you get a pitch deck that really is going to resonate with your potential investors. You then need to prepare a whole bunch of supporting docs, and it is absolutely possible for you as founders to create an advance assurance submission yourself. The first time I ever did it, it took a couple of days because you need the legislation, the VCT manual, as well as all the forms to fill in. There's lots of cross references, but it's absolutely possible to do this yourself, or we can do it for free and save you probably a weekend of hard work. But the supporting docs are that go alongside the other things we've mentioned already. A covering letter, a pair of checklists. You need, unfortunately, two. You need one for SEIS and one for EIS. They're virtually identical, actually. There are 3 additional questions within the EIS checklist, which is annoying, but it is what it is. There's another HMRC form called a VCSAA, which you can Google that and you can complete online. That is almost trivial to complete. What HMRC also asks for are a copy of your to-be adopted shareholders agreement and articles of association. Now, for most founders, they're running their business probably without a shareholders agreement, and almost certainly with what are called model articles. And these are the articles that Companies House will allocate you by default. But HMRC want to see the documentation that your investors will sign up for. And again, that's something we produce via our platform, the Founder Catalyst. Once you've got everything together, so all of the documents we've mentioned so far, the submission is really straightforward. You email to HMRC, and then you wait a while. So in August, the timescales were roughly 3 weeks for an advance assurance response. And that is, I suspect, because lots of people in HMRC were on holiday. Normal times, right now, it's roughly around 2 weeks. The fastest we've ever seen a response from HMRC is a single day. So we've literally submitted something on the Monday, and then by the Tuesday morning, we've got a positive advance assurance response. So hopefully that brings to light brings to life the process by which you submit advance assurance. I'm conscious that I've talked a lot at you, so looking forward to some questions in the Q&A in just a minute.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sam. Some really great detailed information there. And as you can see, Sam knows his stuff inside out. So talk about talking to an expert. So guys, I am going to drop my email in the chat, and we're going to do a very simple race to whoever the first 3 people that email me first will get a call with Sam and I. All right, so it's a very pretty simple rudimentary way, but the first 3 emails that come to my email account can get a free 30-minute workshop with Sam and myself, and we'll schedule those later. So first come, first serve. And if not, come to our next event and try again. So that is what our sort of soft offer at the end of this event is. And now we would like to use 17 minutes to answer your questions. So please drop any questions you have in the chat, come off mute and ask, and then we will do our best to share some more insights.
Simon, I can see your hand up.
Yes, question. I've already made an EIS application successfully, and with the obvious error of not making an SEIS application.
Right.
What's the best way of doing it? Do I start again, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, so as long as you still comply with the SEIS rules, and as long as you haven't used the EIS scheme to take on investment, that is not a catastrophic mistake to make. So what you need to do is complete an SEIS checklist. You basically need to do yet another submission. The only difference is when you are completing the BCSAA, you need to indicate that you've already had correspondence with the VCT team. But yeah, the covering letter, you just make it clear that you've already got EIS, you forgot to do SEIS, and yeah, the rules for SEIS are actually a little tighter than the rules for EIS generally. So HMRC will have a look at it, but it should be a rubber stamping exercise. So yeah, it's not catastrophic at all, Simon.
Great, thank you.
That's something we're more than happy to roll up my sleeves and help with that if you think that'd be useful.
That's very good. I mean, I'm hoping the person who made that error in the first place is going to rectify it. So
yes, yeah, it's it's annoying, but it's trivial to fix.
Yeah, great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Fantastic. Thank you, Simon. Good to see you again. Anyone else got questions? Dan?
Hi guys, thanks ever so much for that talk. I found that really interesting. Bags of loads of really insightful stuff. Sam, both you dovetail really nicely. I was going to ask, just to give you a bit of context, I run a branding agency that specializes in helping startups seeking investment. And one of that critical stages we talked to them about at that pre-seed stage is around the investment deck. We're covering an offering that really dovetails between our big brand experience, because decks for us are all about kind of pace and telling stories and weaving through the narrative accordingly. So Martin, listening to you talk, I mean, all the principles that you speak about, we apply. And it was really interesting, actually. I think you got that point across, just so I could say, really succinctly and really on the money about that high impact, and then weaving that through as a deck, because you almost want that deck to work as strongly for you when you're not in the room. It's your voice in the room when you can't be there. Anyway, my question was that when you go online, there's a lot of stuff around the optimum level of a deck, 12 pages, VCs, angels will spend X amount of time on each slide, blah, 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 blah. In our experience, though, when it comes to the reality of this and then executing for founders for these decks, invariably, when we get their first stage decks, you can barely see any white space on a slide, right? So our first port of call is really distilling down, doing the egg timer, which is simplifying the ample and then amplifying the simple accordingly. But I was going to ask you, we don't want to fall foul of saying this will definitely be the way to success if you stick within this pagination. So in your experience, guys, how much flexibility, because we're dealing with the currency of attention, right? So whether or not, if the pagination goes up to 24 pages, providing there's a good flow to that, do you think that's still an acceptable level of pages, as opposed to just keeping it short just for the sake of short, but really front loading it full of content?
What a great question. Martin, do you want to go first? And I got some strong views on this one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, Dan. Whatever you Google, the 15 slides, 12 slides, 14 slides, it's like, who are you speaking to and where are you in your conversations? So my personal approach is one idea a slide. And
one idea a slide.
One idea per slide. And if you are warmed up, charismatic, ready to go, prepared, you can make 100 slides feel like 40. You can make 40 slides feel like 8. So it's a difference. And one thing that I really focus on through, it's so interesting hearing you talk about how you work with decks, because there's a difference between an inbox deck and a live deck.
Yeah.
So a live deck is a background to the speaker. So it shouldn't take over. You shouldn't put the cart before the horse. An inbox deck is doing all the work remotely, and it needs more context and more framing. And so, for example, I sent an inbox deck to the MBA when I was living in China, and I got a reply in 3 days. And it had a short cover letter, and it was a 17-slide deck with 70 words. But most of the slides had really big images, and I had one goal and one focus. And they got back to me on the Wednesday when I sent it on a Monday.
Yeah. So that's interesting, Martin. If you don't mind me quickly adding that, it's no different to when you drive people through like the customer funnel, the pretzel, from awareness to evaluation to point. It's exactly the same principle we've applied in the ad world as you apply to that, which is really interesting, I must say. Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say real quick is that think about it like DJing. So I used to VJ in Beijing, and all my friends were DJs, and I would watch them prepare, and I was like right next to international DJs and everything. And a DJ spends the afternoon looking at 1,000 records, listens to 100, puts 50 in a bag, but when he gets to the club, he or she will play half of the bag, because they're reading the room and they're building the atmosphere and they're telling a narrative. And so if a founder follows a 14-deck recipe because that's what they were told by Google, they're going to pitch themselves into a corner, because each audience is very different. And so if you go and play a mixtape at a club night or a festival, the audience is going to walk away because they've heard it all before and it's super formulaic. But if you're able to flexibly move to the room, then you're going to be really effective, because you're creating a moment with that audience.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If I may, we refer to that as a deck of cards. We give decks, slides, almost cards, but I really love that. That resonates. I bet that analogy resonates quite strongly when you pitch it like that, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, Sam, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are, I've heard it said, these venture capital only read the first 10 or 15 slides and then get bored and give up, which that doesn't resonate with me at all as an angel investor. There are two things that really annoy me, and I see thousands and thousands of decks a year. The first is not containing everything I need in order to evaluate the proposition, missing big chunks out. Loads of people miss an ask, for example. They're like, well, if you're interested, you can come and ask me. Well, absolutely not. That is one of the key slides to include. If you don't include it, you've got a problem. And the second thing, as Martin's point, I've seen slides where they're trying to make 4 points on a single slide, or the slides are too busy and you just give up because you get a headache. So personally, I would rather see 25 slides, each making a point and ticking every single box, than I would, 10 slides densely packed and missing bits out. But yeah, I mean, the problem with angel investing, and the same with anything in life, is you can show the same deck to 10 people and you'll get 10 different bits of feedback. It will be too long, too short, too detailed, you name it. But my very strong preference is, make sure it contains everything and make sure I'm not overwhelmed by the detail.
Lovely. Thank you, guys. Really, really helpful answer. Appreciate that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dan, for the question. Sam.
Hi, Martin. I don't know why it says Sam. I think it's one of my colleagues' accounts. Question for Sam. So I've been going through SEIS, not the Advance Assurance, and the process started after it was a ASA instrument. and 6 months in, they matured into shares and so on. So it started in January.
Yep.
It's now August, and it's enough. Well, how I started the business was there were a few ideas I wanted to explore, and did them all at the same time. And the one that had legs that progressed through. So what I supplied HMRC was is 6-7 ideas, and then the full narrative, and then each time they had questions, sent in more stuff and things and so on. So the problem is they take about 3 months, not the 3 weeks, for each response. And is that normal, or is something wrong there, or what's your viewpoint? The last message was 2nd of August. Now it's almost months now. So
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
And there are kind of a couple of tracks through the HMRC process. And this is me guessing what goes on. But I think if you make sure that if you make a clear, concise advance assurance application, if you make it easy for HMRC to read and digest, it goes through, they've probably got somebody with a rubber stamp who's, who checks the obvious things. They're looking at the checklist, doing all the cross referral. And then genuinely, I've seen that go through next business day. So they can't be making a huge amount of time. I suspect what happens is when they spot anything that looks unusual, it will go up to a senior member of the team to review. So if you're offering 8 options, or if you don't answer one point, and then typically what will happen when it goes to the senior member of the review team, they won't just ask you the question they've found. They'll review everything and they'll ask you a dozen questions. So when we've, and maybe this marries with your experience, but whenever we've seen a response from HMRC with questions, they make a massive list of questions. It isn't just about one thing, they'll ask you about 10 different things. So we go out of our way and we spend a huge amount of time making sure that HMRC don't have any questions. We answer every, and I can imagine the position you're in, trying to draw 7 different business roadmaps. But in hindsight, I think I'd have focused on one of those and bring that to life, because that would have maybe avoided the set of questions.
Yeah, correct.
And the problem is when you go to the senior review team, those guys have I'm sure, a massive workload of things they're working through, and you kind of get out of the rubber stamping. You're then in a longer timescale, and as you will know, there's a couple of problems with the advance assurance process. The first being it isn't a statutory responsibility for HMRC. So advance assurance isn't enshrined in law, which creates a couple of problems. So firstly, they don't have to do it. And secondly, if they give you an answer you don't agree with, there's no right to appeal, so you can't take it to a tax tribunal. And that's a real problem with the advance assurance process. And the problem being, if you get your advance assurance rejected, A, you can't appeal, you've got no right to appeal, and B, it makes your business virtually uninvestable. So it's a real problem.
So you can get rejected.
Yeah, you can get a firm reject. I've only seen it once with one of our customers, and I still kick myself. We've done hundreds of these, but yeah, we've had one rejection which I didn't spot, and that is where you have done something in your business that has catastrophically broken SEIS and EIS and can't be remedied. So there are some things you can do in your business that you can put the genie back in the bottle, but there are other things where your business is permanently broken for the purpose of SEIS and EIS, and you'll get a rejection with no right to appeal. So hopefully that's not the case in you with your business. I think HMRC are just being repetitive in their questions to make themselves 100% certain.
Okay, that's fine, because each time it's, as you said, there's been 12 questions and so on, and each time I've written essays, which were each question required an essay, and 35 pages, next one 50 pages if you add it all up. And and one of the issues that they had was they didn't quite understand the business, because there's a purpose to it, and the purpose is what drives the business, as opposed to the business model which drives the purpose. So they seem to think that it's for charitable purposes and all of that, and that's one of the issues. So one of my concerns is, will they reject it, even though everything is it's so innovative that people don't fully grasp it, and especially within the compliance side of things. So if there's any sort of risk, that's obviously a bit of a problem. I don't know. I mean, what's your take on that based on what I told you?
Yeah, I mean, it would be really, maybe we can pick up after this.
Sure. Cool.
Yeah, it'd be great if you could, it'd be great to see some of the correspondence and find out. I mean, hopefully by the line of questioning, it will be evident where HMRC think that think there is a risk you are not compliant. And it might be around genuine growth. You've got to demonstrate you want to grow by one of the key metrics you look at. So let's pick this one up.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's fine.
And HMRC only literally have 50 questions or whatever that you need to satisfy. And if you've satisfied every one, then that's great. And I think by the questions you're asking, it will be evident where they think there's a risk your business isn't compliant.
Okay, thanks, Sam.
Wonderful, fantastic, guys. Right, we're going to wrap it up now because we are 2 minutes away from the end. So just before we go, we would love it if you would let us know if you would recommend this to a friend, because that is the best way to get some feedback. And Sam, how would you like people to connect with you?
So I put my LinkedIn in the chat. I won't bother anybody by putting anything else there, but it'd be great to get a LinkedIn connection and then a message or whatever, or head to the Founder Catalyst site and there's a book a meeting now slot, and there's one of those helpful Calendly things. So that would be great.
Fantastic. I'm going to say the same. My LinkedIn is in the chat. If you can't find it, you just search Crocodile Wrestler and you will find me on LinkedIn. And please connect on LinkedIn. It is the only place I have my social media time and attention. And we will follow up with the people who've emailed us. And guys, the last thing I'm going to say is if you want pitching practice, I host a bi-weekly pitch club, which Lanx and Sam and Simon have all been to, and Rishka. And it is an amazing time to come and practice your 3-minute pitch, get your Rockstar trousers on, and get some amazing feedback from a wonderful community. So guys, I'll see you there, but it's all talked about in LinkedIn. Thank you very much for making the time to be here today. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Lanx, Lucy, Simon, Dan, Joel, Guava, Gabriella, Simon, and Rishka, and everyone else who had to drop off.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Love to see you all.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye-bye.